saying, he's like, oh, go to the side of the room so you can introduce yourself. And I'm like, yeah, I can gracefully fall on the stage trying to get up here. But I managed to, so it's all good. We're going off to a good start here. So today I'm going to talk a lot about product, which is something I normally avoid, like literally. Like I really religiously hate people when they go on stage, but they talk about products all the time. But I think it's a very important point in time for us, and also for me personally, that is happening right now, that we have to be aware of a change that's coming. And to me, it's all about excuses. And to me, it's about making a web better. And we always find excuses for ourselves. We find excuses in our environment. We find excuses in our knowledge. We always want to make the web better. We live on it. Let's face it, none of us in this room would probably have a job if the web didn't exist. We would still be doing like mainframe programming and interactive CD-ROMs and stuff like that nobody needs anymore. And well, probably some of you will do mobile native development right now, but they wouldn't be at this conference, weirdly enough. So it's always a bit of a worry for people, like, why is it not working? Why can't I do the things on the web that I wanted to do? And I've been an advocate for HTML5 and open web standards, and before that for CSS, and before that for unobtrusive JavaScript and DOM scripting, and all the books that I've written were always like, here's good technology on the web, but it's not trustworthy, so use it with an if statement around it. And a lot of my books weren't that successful because of that cautiousness. A lot of people want to have these talks and books where they're like, you just use these 3 lines of code and you will make $50 million tomorrow and nobody will ever have a problem with your code. Which, of course, is, to use a technical term, bullshit. But it happens all the time. People want to have solutions that are simple. And especially with HTML5, there was this big hoo-ha that it became a fashion statement. It became the new DHTML. It became the new Ajax. It became the new whatever server faces or whatever we told us. Every half year, we get something new that is like, it's a technology stack, but don't you worry. Here is a tool that does it for you. Don't look under the hood. Don't try to understand what you're doing. Just trust the product. And I think it's just terrible that we keep doing that. And it's especially terrible that HTML5 was meant to be the Flash killer. And Flash was a good solution for a lot of problems. We had a lot of things on the web because of Flash that we wouldn't have had at that time, like video streaming, like games, like the whimsical animations that we all loved the web so much. The start of the social web was just sharing funny animations and comics with each other, and we wouldn't have had those if they were an animated GIF back then, because our connections weren't fast enough to download those 7 megs of GIFs that we send each other right now, because that's what we do. And HTML5, a certain fruit company in America said, is not good enough. And then they actually, Flash is not good enough, and HTML5 is the future. And here's a cool browser for you that understands all of HTML5, and you have the same fidelity and the same beautiful things that you can have in Flash if you stay in our environment and buy our hardware. And other people, like Mozilla that I used to work for, and Adobe and others, basically said, hang on, HTML5 is an open standard. It's invented by Google and by Mozilla together because XHTML was too strict and was not the future of the web, and was not web ready because it just assumed that developers never make mistakes, which we do. HTML5 is much more lenient on us and allows us to build things that are a static page, that are an application, that are a grid to actually do your finances with, that are an email client. The technology is a stack of things to pick and choose. But a lot of HTML5 became like, here is this one-button solution to do it, and a lot of HTML5 solutions that way are also terrible and don't stack up to what native is about. That's how HTML5 got a bad reputation. My personal problem with HTML5 was that I was on stage and I talked about all the great stuff that we have, like app cache and local storage and device orientation tracking, location. I mean, location services were in Firefox 3.5. And there's still people ask me right now, oh, can I do location in HTML5? Yes, you bloody can. It has been around for a long, long time. Go to caniuse.com, look it up, which browser supports it, then use it. That's how simple it is. But every single answer I got, when I showed these cool things, I showed people the stuff that I can do, like drag and drop images into a browser, zip them up on the fly, create thumbnails, and save them without ever touching the server. The main answer is like, I would love to use all this cool HTML5 stuff, but I have to support Internet Explorer. So instead of to keep calm and trust HTML5, we had this experience. And to a degree, this became a running gag. Like, this is a slide that went around for a long, long time, like how to tell HTML5 from HTML from HTML5, try it out in Internet Explorer, did it work? No, then it's HTML5. And that made me angry, and that pissed me off. Because it's a fundamental misunderstanding of what HTML5 was supposed to do. It's not catering to the lowest common denominator. It's not catering to that IE6 that everybody uses. It's actually just making something that works in all the browsers and becomes better when the end user's browser or the end user's environment becomes richer. You should not have the same interface on a mobile device that you have on a desktop device. That doesn't make any sense. Having like 3 buttons this big with a gradient background because it looks like iOS on my desktop machine is not a good solution. That just shows me that you thought iOS and the iPhone is HTML5. And when I get angry, then I do things about it, because fundamentally, the main problem is that HTML5 is backwards compatible and fault tolerant. If you type something in HTML and the browser doesn't know it, it says, and goes on. If you type something wrong in JavaScript, the browser says like, oh my God, fire, let's run away, I'm stopping everything I'm doing right now. You cannot make mistakes in HTML5. Browsers are so lenient with you and actually fix things for you, and that's because we realize that developers make mistakes. Weirdly enough, we pay them enough, they shouldn't, but they do. I did some in the past as well, but I keep fixing them. I'd make them all the time. So HTML5 is not about one browser. HTML5 is about the web and giving the web new capabilities. Great capabilities like device orientation, like file reader API, like databases on the client side, offline functionality, great things like web worker in the making right now, and all these new functionalities are coming in and should be available across all these browsers. It should not matter which browser end users have, because it's almost like arrogant to think that we could control our end users and tell them like, you need this browser to go to this website. You go to a website right now that tells you Internet Explorer 6 is needed at an 800 by 600 resolution, and you'll be like, that man is just, who makes this website? I will never go back to them. I will go and egg their house and shout rude words at their dog and something like that. But at the same time, we see a website that says like Chrome is needed to experience this great web solution, and people are like, oh wow, this is amazing. And that's exactly the same mistake. We cannot expect people to just download a new browser because we want it. The things we have, these machines, the cool browsers that you have there, the tablets that you got today, that speakers don't get, but I'm not terrible about that. All these things are amazing, but the end users don't have them out there. The end users have all kind of stuff that you think, sometimes you think you hate developers, right? That's why you set up your computer this way. But no, they had it set up that way once, years and years ago, and they don't want to change it because it's scary. They don't want to know what computers are doing. I click that blue E thing, and then it goes to the internet, and then I can see the weather for tomorrow. This is what people think computing is about. And that's okay, because these are the people that also watch ads and click on them. We don't. We have ad blockers installed. You know, we're not our audience. We just pretend that we're better, but we're not. We do other mistakes. Internet Explorer dropped completely off our radar as developers. It was like this kid in the background that was just eating glue while Firefox and Chrome were fighting. And we got super excited about what Chrome and Firefox are doing. Like, we concentrated 100% on that one. I mean, I've got Firefox still as my main browser. I use Chrome for lots of stuff as well. I haven't started Safari ever on this computer, except for when I needed to log into some wireless that didn't allow me to do it with any other browser. But that's because I'm a developer. I've been using Firefox since the very beginning. I've been using Chrome since the very beginning. But we concentrated completely on those two, and we forgot about Internet Explorer because that's only people who we don't want to talk to right now. Like, you know, these are the boring ones, you know, the things where I have to put my taxes in, the things where I get my money from, the bank where I trust with my money is running on Windows, but that's not what real cool people do, you know? So as cool modern web developers, we made our choice. We had apples. And we use apples, and we love them to bits because that's beautiful open source hardware where nothing is controlled. Oh, wait. And I get it. I use them as well. I like a command line. I like Unix. I don't want to install new Linux distributions every week. It just works for me and it does the job. But it's, again, not the world out there. And they don't change them every month or year like we do as well. They have older computers. You go to like internet cafes and you see these old iMacs and you're like, really? You still have those things? But they're there. And of course, with Macs, we had the problem that Internet Explorer just didn't exist. So we had to use a VM, or we had to buy a cheap laptop to test things on, or we have to find a friend who uses Windows, and that's hard to find. In our world. I've been at 47 conferences in 26 countries. And in some countries, I go there and open my Mac and people are like, oh, shiny. You know, because everybody has a Windows machine, sometimes old IBM machines, and they're happy, and they're coding, and they're amazingly creative, beautiful people that do cool stuff with them. Like, just because in the Western world we get bored with our gadgets within half a year doesn't mean that the world is going on like that as well. These are powerful old machines that are out there. I just threw away a lot of stuff in my old flat because I had to move into a new one. And I gave away this old Lion Mac Mini, and I gave an older desktop machine. I had a desktop machine at home, like a Windows machine, and I hadn't started that in donkey's years. I didn't know what was on there. And before I give it away, I probably check what's on the hardware. That's a good idea. And I started the thing up. It was like Windows XP, and Phoenix was the browser, the out-of-the-box browser, the one before Firefox. So I hadn't started this thing since 2003 or something like that. So I'm like, why do I have this machine? And then I'm like, yeah, okay, I put it on FreeCycle, I put it on Gumtree. 170 emails within 12 minutes. Oh, I need this computer, my son needs to do his homework, he needs a computer. People didn't even know what it was. They said like, we have a computer, it needs to go on the internet, he has to type something in Word. Thank you, I need a computer. And I was thinking I have to pay somebody to pick that thing up from me, because for me it's like, what, desktop, really? And not even for gaming is that thing useful anymore, but people want it. And we just live in our bubble and think this is not the case. So does IE even matter? Does it even matter for us? Well, if you look at statistics, then it does. This is net market share worldwide. It's still at like 55%, and this is mostly because it's used in banks and stuff like that. And even the statcounter.com, the one that we look at for everything, which is, of course, a counter that we put in our pages, which means we measure ourselves, so we get the results that we're actually looking forward to. Even there, it's 22%, and it's over Firefox, which, of course, should piss me off, but it was more than that, because there's a simple reason for this. The out-of-the-box browser really, really matters. What comes with the computer, what is the clicky thing that gets me to the internet, is what the internet is. I don't want to know what a browser is. I don't want to download another browser. People download browsers because of 3 reasons. They're developers. They want the services that the company offers that makes this browser. In Google's case, I want to have Google Now. I want to have Google site translation. A lot of people installed Google instead of Firefox because it translated websites automatically for them, which Firefox didn't do. Or they installed it with a bundle that comes with their browser. So for example, Adobe Reader, when you download that one, it says like, well, you can upgrade Adobe Reader and have the experience of upgrading it every 2 weeks, or you can switch to Chrome, which has Adobe Reader installed, as it has this internal display of PDFs. That's how people change their browsers. Otherwise, it's the out-of-the-box browser. And this, to me, is the most painful thing as an HTML5 guy, because the stock browsers on Android are terrible. Like on the new Android L and the new Android M now, great, it's now Chrome and it's like evergreen if you go through the Play Market. But if you don't go through the Play Market, like a lot of people in China and Africa and somewhere do, then you still get this old, outdated browser. We had this hardwired browser and operating system mistake for a long, long time. And it's still very prevalent because people click on the thing that comes with the operating system. Why should I do something to go online? It was bad enough to set up that router and get the BT guy come in and put the cables in there. IE 11 actually had a lot of good standards and features. It had all the things we wanted. It had like WebGL, WebSockets, App Cache, IndexedDB, and so on and so forth. But we never knew about it because we are on a Mac. And the messaging was completely off. It was all about standard compliance. Microsoft was always the company that says like, we stick with the standards, we don't do the innovative, creative stuff that other companies are doing and wildly putting new things in the browser that you cannot use, because we didn't want to aggravate the enterprise customers that we have, because they're scared of innovation that isn't quite finished yet. So we, as developers, we never understood why this bothers, because we're like, okay, CSS3 border radius is now working in Internet Explorer 11 after it's been like experimental in other browsers for 2 years. We're like, so? Well, it meant a lot of people can now use it in an environment that we don't normally access, like the enterprise environment where people pay us a lot of money, weirdly enough. So Internet Explorer is gone. And it's going to be replaced by Microsoft Edge. Microsoft Edge is the new browser that comes in Windows 10 out of the box. It's the same on Windows desktop, it's the same on mobile, it's the same on Xbox, there's an IoT build, all kind of stuff going on. It's going to be the browser on all these devices. It's evergreen and constantly updated, it's on par with other browsers, it has a free upgrade from Windows 7 to 8 to Windows 10, and very, very soon this will matter to us as developers because Windows 10 is coming. Now, the interesting bit here is that whenever we talked about IE is our enemy, we talked about the old IEs on old operating systems. I challenge every one of you to look at your statistics, and when you say like, okay, I've got so many Windows 6, Internet Explorer 6 and Internet Explorer 8 visits, to look at if they really are users, or if they're not spam bots that actually pretend to be IE6. Because if I write a spam bot, that's what I would put in there, because nobody blocks that. There was actually a problem with a virus scanning company in Germany that worked with a search engine that pre-scanned every link and identified itself as IE6. So in Germany, IE6 was always a much higher percentage than it should be. So I'm not here to tell you about the browser speed and feature comparisons, because there's nothing more boring on this planet than that. I just hate all these talks when people are like, oh, a browser in this benchmark is so and so many % faster than this browser in that benchmark. Who cares? It's good for browser makers, it's interesting for JavaScript developers, but for end users out there, they're not going to change their browser because it's 2.4% faster in JavaScript, in experimental JavaScript features that nobody uses in the wild yet. And I don't understand how we get too excited about comparing browsers with each other when all we really have to worry about that people have a browser that makes sense and actually supports the things that we have out there. So instead, I want to report to you how the browser was created. I want to give you a little tour of the sausage factory, because I found there were really interesting bits and bobs in there that, to me as a developer, were depressing to a degree, but also not surprising. And what it means to us developers. Now, Microsoft Edge is a fork from the past. Trident was the engine in Internet Explorer, and my colleague was earlier showing it is like for 20 years the same browser. And we're scared of changing it because too many things were relying on it, and lots of internal stuff like my expense system in Microsoft. Great fun, like the 1997 feel to it, like lots of little buttons and stuff. So what we did, we split the engine. We took Internet Explorer 11 and we put it on the side, and we said, okay, this is going to be the thing for the legacy surfing experience, the legacy site experience, the things that need all the things that we put on the web that were only Windows, that were only Internet Explorer. The other one was a new kit, and we said, like, okay, we take the networking stack, everything that is connecting to the internet, talking to the hardware, that can stay because that doesn't change in Windows much. It had to change already with Windows 8, and we then start a new engine. Now, first question everybody asked me, why didn't you just use Blink? Because Chrome uses Blink, Opera uses Blink. The answer is because that would be a terrible, terrible thing for the web. Web standards can only exist if several browser engines support them and test them for their validity if they really make any sense. Having one engine to rule the web would be the same mistake we did with Trident in 1999. It's the same problem. Like, there's no way one company should be ruling the way the internet should get rendered. It should always be several people testing the standard for application, for sensibility as well, and for making a good experience. So we don't go for Blink because it doesn't make any sense to have just one engine for the web. And the engine itself that we built with Edge do much more things on Windows than other browsers do for Windows itself. So we didn't have to reinvent the wheel to making Blink talk to a lot of the stuff internally. Interoperability was the new approach. In the past, we said, like, this is the browser of Windows and it supports standards. Standards that everybody loves, W3C standards that nobody read for the last 20 years, but are really, really important for a few people when they tick their boxes when it comes to like signing off for the next 3 months what to build in the project. So we are aware that the experience with Internet Explorer is always a bit different. You know, you always had like this, everything worked until you tried an Internet Explorer and you're like, why do you do this to me? What's going on there? I did everything right. What do I want to do? What do you want, blood? And then we went on and we said the web should work for everybody. Developers, businesses, and end users. And end users, to me, are the most important ones. And this is a tightrope walk that you have no idea about. Because what developers want, businesses hate. What users like, developers think is outdated. What businesses think users should get, users write blocking software against it and these kind of things. So it's a massive tightrope walk, but I think it's very important that a browser is featuring something for all of these different audiences, because if it's just a developer browser, well done. We can clap on each other and be very excited that this browser is amazing, but if no end user uses it, we have a problem. Interoperability means the web just works. And the problem was that we found when we analyzed the web and we rebuilt the browser is that a lot of stuff on the web is not according to standards, but works in all the browsers. So Chrome, Firefox, and Opera agreed on something that was violating the specifications, but it's already in all the browsers, so they're not going to likely change it just because to verify one specification or to be compliant with a specification that there is no repercussion for. When you violate a specification, there's nobody coming to your door and kicking you in the shins. Just like, nah, who cares? You know, it's supposedly for us helping us making better browsers, but a lot of times shortcuts have been taken. And a lot of these code examples here, so I don't need to read them right now, says basically like IE does it wrong because the other browsers do it differently. And a lot of times IE did it according to the specifications, but nobody else did. So people thought it's okay, that's the wrong thing. This is called a pseudo standard or a quasi-standard or whatever people call it. And I think it's kind of not a standard, but it's there. We cannot break the web. So we put a lot of stuff into the browser that people wrote for other browsers because that's just how they do it. And we didn't want to write people variable names like I hate IE, for example, anymore. The main issue was that we didn't even get the right content. We surfed around with our new engine. We're like, oh, look at pretty engine, best ES6 support, really cool HTML5 support, and then we didn't get anything to test with. This is Hawaiian Airlines, how it looks like on an iOS device in Safari. Beautiful, good interface for mobile. If you use Firefox on an Android device, you get that experience. If you use Internet Explorer on a mobile device, you get that experience. And that's the same page, which to me is a testament to the power of HTML. But it isn't, because it's not the same document, because they actually check which browser is in use and give you an experience for each of them. That's called user agent sniffing and is an invention of Beelzebub to make us unhappy. Because in essence, it means that you maintain 3 different versions of your website, which is in essence means you maintain this one and you hope those don't break because you don't put effort into them, because everybody has an iPhone in my neighborhood, so that means the world has an iPhone. So what we needed to do is like put a cloak on our browser and say, hey, we're Chrome, please show us stuff. So we put the wrong user agent in the browser and we started surfing the web and we started to find problems that we can fix in our engine before we release it, because we didn't want to break the web. We could have emailed each and every one of those developers and said, like, you're doing it wrong, but developers don't like that, strangely enough. Now, user agent strings, or as Patrick Lauke says, a pack of lies, are an interesting thing. These tell you apparently what the browser in use is, whereas Mozilla is Mozilla 5.0, Windows NT, what? WoW 64, Gecko 2000-something, Firefox 35.0, Safari is this, Mozilla, Chrome is this, and Microsoft Edge is this. These get longer and longer, as you see, because every time a new browser came out, we had to put things in there so the websites would show up. Opera was the first browser to say, I'm Opera, and nothing else. And half of the web didn't show up in Opera at all and said, like, you're not a browser, I'm not going to give you a website. I don't know what you are. So they put the whole Mozilla 5.0 thing in there as well, and then it started getting crazy. Because if you look at it, Mozilla 5.0 is in everything, Gecko is in everything, KHTML is in almost everything, Apple WebKit is in almost everything. And if you look up what these things really meant, Mozilla 5.0 was Netscape, Gecko was Firebird, or Phoenix, before Firefox. KHTML was Conqueror, was the bane of my existence when I wrote my JavaScript book, because my tester used that browser and nobody else on this planet, I think. And yeah, then everybody of those have to keep compatible with something else. So you really don't know what's going on there, but we have to maintain these things because people test for them. Anybody knows what Mozilla 5.0 was? Netscape 6. So every time you test for Mozilla 5.0, you give people the experience from 1997. No, 2003, I think, yeah. And Netscape 6 was amazing, because as a JavaScript developer, I loved it, because it was the first browser that did the DOM thing properly, like get element by ID rather than like having to traverse the DOM yourself. It had like the whole DOM thing, and nothing in it worked. That's why people didn't use it, except for me installing it on people's machine, because I'm evil. And even the HTML5 standard does this. If you look at the standard, the app code name of the navigator ID is a constant called Mozilla, and the product name is a constant called Gecko. That is free advertising that Mozilla is getting in the HTML5 standard. So when you build a new browser according to the HTML5 standard, you have to put this cruft in there, because breakage otherwise. Don't tell people you're not Mozilla. Now, if you want to test if a browser is a mobile device, this is something we found on the web that somebody is using. Oddly enough, a Windows phone doesn't show up as a mobile device using that one. So it needs a bit of tweaking. I'm not quite sure where, but there might be something in there. This is craziness, but we do this, and we keep it up every time a new browser comes out, every time a new mobile phone comes out, every time a new mobile provider thinks he has to put a new browser in your mobile device, although it has another browser in the operating system. Please don't do UA sniffing. Don't trust that pack of lies. Don't trust that the browser user agent tells you really what it is, because I can fake any user agent with my computer. I can pretend to be any browser I want to if I want to get to your access. And I love it when people are like, oh, I'm a fanboy of Chrome. You can only see my blog when you use Chrome. Or I can use any other browser and change the UA string. Magic. Okay, sometimes you have to do UA sniffing. If there's just one terrible bug in one browser, you have to make sure, okay, this is this browser. But if you do, please do feature detection first. Like, does it support this thing? Then use this thing. Much like, do I jump in the river after I check there's no crocodiles in there? Or do I just pretend there's no crocodiles in there? If you isolate a bug, if you find one bug, check out the browser and the version and the operating system. Make it as defined as possible so you don't block out the rest of the browsers in the future as well. Because if we fix bugs in browsers and you still test nilly-willy for just the browser, our fix would never show up. So we wasted our efforts. So assume that all browsers are good. They are all good. They're nice guys. They make coffee for you and they bring cakes. Browsers are nice people. So assume that they're doing good things. Now we have the interoperable intersection, which is completely not to scale and just randomly made up because, yeah, PowerPoint, of browsers here. We've got Safari and we've got Chrome, we've got Firefox, we've got Internet Explorer. And all of these had their own stuff, and some of them had an interoperable bit in the middle. This is like what all the browsers are doing together. And you don't see that because it's not working. Anyways, with Internet Explorer, when we went to Edge, we said like, okay, sort this, get rid of all the Internet Explorer stuff, because it's over. The 90s are over. Spice Girls are not around anymore. Let's not do this kind of stuff. And then we concentrated partly on the mobile web, because that's where the biggest growth is. That's where most people are using, new users are using the web and what we're thinking about. And the functionality of the mobile web is more important than functionality of the desktop web, because you can desktop, you do a lot of stuff. What do we mean by prioritizing interop? The first interop 0 means this is the most important thing. It worked in Internet Explorer 11. We cannot make things break in Internet Explorer 11 that used to work because, yeah, it's just, we cannot just, businesses rely on that kind of stuff at times. The second one was it's used by real sites. People use this stuff, like geolocation, these kind of things. And it works in other browsers. So this is also very, very important to us. Then the second step is like, We anticipate that it will be important in the near future. This is stuff that's almost ready for production, almost ready to be rolled out, like video streaming, these kind of things, like the things we really want. And then there's Interop 3, which is like, yeah, the crazy fever dreams of other browser makers and us, that we're actually innovating and just building new things, and we're not necessarily going to be across browsers, so it's not that important that we support it. One of the things was, for example, font resource handling. According to the W3C specification, a browser has to check a course header on a font before it actually displays it. This is because of copyright reasons. Because fonts are copyrighted, strangely enough. Most people don't think about that when they just use web fonts nilly-willy and like, oh, if it's not on font source, then I basically find some Russian website, download it there, that's going to be okay. And let's not forget that also fonts are binary data that talk directly to the graphics card, so there's a massive security problem there as well if we don't check what the browser is. Then again, Chrome and WebKit don't do the course header checking, they just show the font. That's why we found websites that have these icons here on the right-hand side and no icons in Edge, and then when we turned off that course header check, then the icons showed up. Which is, let's not break the web. Let's make sure that this thing works, because we can't go to Hawaiian Airlines and say, like, you're doing wrong things with fonts, because we don't have time to tell them all of that kind of stuff. Control appearance overrides are another big important thing. WebKit appearance is a lot of stuff people build their own drop-downs, build their own radio buttons, build their own beautiful things for an iPhone, and wanted to override what the iPhone gave you out of the box. That was always the biggest issue in any browser, like, oh, the drop-down is ugly, can I override this? A WebKit appearance with a dash, WebKit dash, which means don't trust it, because it will steal your money, allowed you to override that. And a WebKit appearance none is used in a lot of websites because it takes off the original look and feel and then allows you to design your own Dropbox that looks according to a specification of what your CEO likes this week. This can be absolutely fatal, because, for example, in this website, I was like, okay, what's my gender? Is it the empty circle or the full circle? And I mean, like, instead of just saying male or female or whatever, which you should do, they just made these two icons there, and if the icons don't show up, I'm like, okay, it shouldn't really matter what gender I am with an app, but it's just confusing, this kind of stuff. Gradients are the biggest issue in this one as well. The gradient specification has been going up and down like a roller coaster. Everybody built different ways of doing it, all of them completely unreadable to me. That's why, let's face it, we all go to a gradient generator and generate the thing and copy and paste the CSS into our websites. But that changed a lot, and a lot of gradients are just not displaying correctly, which in this case is not much of a problem. It's just a bit of a shadowy thing, but there's a lot of buttons out there that are white with white text. Yeah, okay, I can do Command A and like highlight the whole page and then guess what the button is, but that's going to be hard on a mobile device. And that's the kind of stuff that we now have to support as well. So we don't have to support only the linear gradient like it is supposed to be for the in the W3C, but also the old WebKit ones, because not everybody buys a new iPhone when they come out. They stick with their old one as well. Inner HTML orphan children was something that in Stack Overflow comes around. So we don't just surf the web and find mistakes and then like fix them and just like, no. We also get shouted out a lot, which is like, in Microsoft's case, very, very big. And in Stack Overflow, people have been reporting this bug for years and years, which means like if you have an element and you get a reference to it and then you do inner HTML 0 on the parent element of that, the children should not be deleted because they're in the representation of the DOM rather than the display of the DOM. Don't know why you need this, but people got very excited about this, so we fixed that now. So all in all, we put like over 4,500 or something bugs like this. We found them and we looked at them on the web, and because we pretended to be Chrome, we found these issues and we fixed them in the browser. Against the standard in a lot of cases, which is kind of dirty, but like it's used. We cannot tell everybody to change their stuff, so we have to do something about it. Then of course we removed code, VML. Attach event, VB script, conditional comments, XUA compatible, current style, IE layout quirks, MS prefixed events. All of this crap's gone. And this is so good as a developer to have a chance to delete stuff. You know, like all of you probably had some product where you had to release it, and like then the boss said, like, yeah, in 2 months' time we're going to go back and you have a chance to clean it all up. And it never comes. You probably leave the company and go somewhere else by then. You're like, and then like, what did you do in your old company? Nothing. I don't want to show it to you. And I mean, some of the things there, you know, like IE layout quirks. Remember has layout? Zoom 1 on every CSS element that you had to put in there. Awful stuff, and it's all gone. Conditional comments I liked to a degree because it allowed you to do things for one browser only, but it also means you have to write a lot of code for one browser only, so it's not really maintenance of the web. Let's remember the things that have passed in Internet Explorer. So this is all the code that we removed. I think it's 450,000 lines of code or something like that that got thrown out of the engine, and 500,000 lines of code of new, beautiful, like 50 plus new HTML5 specifications went into the code, which is, okay, more code now, but actually more useful code and less of this stuff. So it was not enough to be shouted at by people and told what's broken, but also to test websites and to find out. Because what we did for how we found that the Hawaiian Airlines, for example, is we used the Alexa numbers and got like the first 40,000 most used websites out there. So if you see me on Twitter talking to some large companies, might be one of those when something's going wrong there. But we also wanted to use data to design the platform. So we have this insider program, which is 3 million users. And they actually got a preview of Windows 10, they got the preview of Edge, and were asked to say the smiley or the frowny face when something went wrong or something went right. And then we got the information from that, and we found out, yes, this is broken, great, we can fix it. So seeing there's 3 million people, it's about a few trillion pages on the website, so each one of our 3 million insiders only needs to test 11 million websites to actually fix Internet Explorer for us. Most of them are not quite there yet. Some of them are like halfway through the numbers, but it's not quite what's going on. So we needed another way to scale this thing. Well, the good thing is we have a search engine, which is, to me, ironic because I came from Yahoo and I wrote a lot of that search engine technology in Yahoo, and now I see it again in Microsoft. 33 trillion pages, 44 billion sites, and 7,000 APIs are actually indexed by Bing. So what we did is we thought, okay, we can make something awesome with this. So we built an Internet Explorer, a Microsoft Edge engine that was just the engine. And we then put some instrumentation layer on top of it that measures like how many -WebKit dash things are being used, how many border radius without a prefix are used, how many of them with prefixes are used. And then we put a web crawler of Bing on top of that and send it off to the web and like, go your merry way and find crap and help us to fix it. And whatever we found, we put in a database, we analyzed with like all kind of machine learning, AI stuff, and then we put it back into the browser and fixed it up. So this was the last step of like plowing through the web of what it is right now to fix it. There we found things like XPath, which a lot of my youth went into when I had to do like XSLT stuff and these kind of things, like generating PDFs with XSLTFO and other things that still hurt. XPath is used by quite some websites. I wouldn't have thought, but actually I think there was some Java thing that in the past used it. So for example, TomTom, if XPath is not supported, you don't get any prizes. Everything's free. Not bad. For end users, it's a great thing. Not so much for TomTom. And as we want to make developers, end users, and businesses happy. There are the lotto numbers on this website where you just don't know if you've won. So XPath is a massive engine. It's a very, whoever had to use the MS XML parser and all these like Volon or whatever it was called back then, Zalan, to actually do XPath with, no, this is heavy stuff and really slows down a browser. So we were like, what can we do with XPath that we don't have to support XPath? And we realized that the CSS selector engine with the CSS3 selectors and the upcoming CSS4 selectors are super powerful. So how about we try to think if we can get most XPath into CSS and just use the CSS rendering engine of the browser to do this XPath rendering and give you the data back. That's basically what you wanted. And we managed to do it, and we managed to see that most of the things that we indexed with the browser or with the crawler, we found out we can do with CSS, 94%. Then we tweaked the CSS engine a bit more, put a few more things in which we wanted anyways, but now we had a reason to put it in there, and we got it up to 97%. So what do you do when something is 3% missing? You use JavaScript. So we found an open source JavaScript library that actually uses XPath and supports 100% what XPath is in the specification, which no browser does, strangely enough. It's called Wicked Good XPath, great name. And then we put that into native CSS, native JavaScript as we call it, a precompiled JavaScript for the browser itself, and now we got 100% XPath support without supporting XPath. Just, you didn't need to know, you just get the data back. And that's totally fine. And we also found a few bugs in the XPath engine and in the Wicked Good XPath library, and we feed back our findings to that one. Everybody wins. And this is what's going to be the future of this one now. We're thinking about standards and roadmap. On average, browser makers have about 80 people in about 53 different groups that are now the W3C to make up standards. We've got 90 people in there because we've done it longer. And now we have 3 engines to support all these new standards. And this is good. This makes a standard move forward. This is not a like, oh, Internet Explorer has it, why don't you guys do it? It's like, we have it, let's fix it, let's make it, let's roll it out. So it's only good for the standards committee and the standards bodies if more browsers support this kind of stuff. So there's lots and lots of specifications coming up. And as we now have another big player in the market finally catching up after 20 years and not sitting in the background eating glue anymore, we have a chance to get the new standards out faster without any one company putting their political ideas or their commercial needs into the standard, which a lot of standards that in the last few years have been coming out looked like it. I mean, a lot of standards that just got supported by only one browser on one operating system on one mobile device is not a standard that others are implementing anytime soon. Pointer events was a great idea. Microsoft was the only company evil enough to give you, as a developer, a machine that could be a keyboard, a mouse, a touch, or a stylus, like the Surface table. Which is cool, I actually use that thing now, but as a developer it was just a nightmare. Now, do I have to have like 6 different event handlers on every element right now because I don't know what it is? So the pointer event specification tells you what it is. You just have one event handler and it says like, this was a touch, this was a pencil, this was a dog, this was somebody looking at the screen, or whatever is going to come in the nearer future, because IoT and whatever, you don't know. Like body temperature changing, heart rate changing, these kind of things. And Google then said, like, nah, we're not going to implement it because Apple said it's shit. And because Apple said rightfully to a degree that things like a drag to release or a drag to reload is not possible with a pointer event. You have to do a touch event specification, which was another terrible one. If you really want to have pain, look at the drag and drop specification. That's probably the worst ever written. I really want to see this thing to do something different soon. But then Chrome came around and did the pixel and like, hey, we have a touch screen and we got a keyboard. Oh, pointer events. Yeah, hey, pointer events are amazing. So now pointer events are supported in Blink and in Internet Explorer and in Firefox probably soon as well. And we have the specification because there's a new kid on the block and a new browser and a new hardware that needs it. We plan all this stuff in the open. That's something that Microsoft hasn't done very good in the past as well. We've been terrible in our outreach to developers. We just gave you stickers and told you, like, it's a cool browser, please love us. But now we're actually telling you what's going on, what's in the browser, in IE 10, it's under consideration, it's in development, it's in the preview release, it's in the live release right now. And if you look over time, how many of these things went from under consideration into preview, it's getting more and more in the preview because we're getting the browser faster and better out there. Status.modern.ie is giving you all that information. And you can also see, as you can see in the icons down there, which browser supports it. So if all of these things are lit, use this stuff now. And use it to good, not for evil, but use it. What's available in Microsoft Edge? Meh, lots of stuff. What's in the works now? Meh, even more stuff. Again, I said I don't like this, like our browser does this, yay, our browser does that. Yeah, it's your use case that makes the thing important. And if the browser supports it, then we're going with it. So how does that work with the whole like under consideration? Because that sounds a bit like, yeah, we consider it, come back, you know? Under consideration is, in our case, a lot of stuff. It mostly is there a real world usage data? Are people using this stuff? Or is it not just something that developers heard on an event and got excited about and never used in their whole life? Greatest example, App Cache. App Cache is awesome. I used App Cache for a lot of stuff because it means it works offline. You know, my HTML page doesn't have to get loaded from the web all the time. My images don't have to get loaded from the web all the time. Imagine a conference having the schedule of the conference as an HTML page with an app cache on it. You don't have to install an application for every conference that you go to. I'm not pointing out here anything. But app cache is great. It's also a really rushed specification. It was just like, we need something like this. Let's write something that looks like htaccess, but is on steroids for offline stuff. This is now app cache. This is how HTML5 works offline. And Jake Archibald wrote an article about it, how app cache is not good. And everybody just keeps quoting that thing and saying app cache is not good enough. And then we looked at Web Worker, when I was still in Mozilla, and we found out that only 0.08% of the whole websites that Firefox showed have an app cache. So every developer tells me how broken that thing is, but nobody used it. So no, I'm sorry. Like, this is not a real world usage. It's supported in the browser, but I think we should be very aware that like when we complain about something not being supported, we also need to try it out, and we need to tell people when we get stuck, not just say, oh, it didn't work because that guy said it didn't work, so I'm not going to use it. Maybe for their use case it didn't work, and for your case it's perfectly fine. Developer and partner feedback is a big one as well, like partner companies and developer feedback, and I'm going to come back to that in a second because we have everything for you to tell us about. Standard stability, is the standard actually making sense? And great example is gradients, because they change so many times with good reasons every single time, not just because, you did like it, I want to do it differently. And of course, development capacity. We're also only a few dozen people on the team, so we don't. What do we actually put more people on? What is more important? Can people watch YouTube or Netflix on the next version of the browser? Or is it like the 3D rendering mode, blend mode, while music is playing in the background on a cube thing? Which is a specification that's in the writing right now. In essence, to me, I don't care what browser you use or prefer. And I don't want you to use Edge. You're probably on a Mac. You will not use it anytime soon. And I won't use it on my Mac either. I will use it on my Windows machine because it comes with Windows 10 and I don't have a choice. And that's good because it's a better browser than the one that was there already. I know that it's a better browser. The normal end user out there just gets a better browser without knowing it. Nobody should make that decision for you to tell you you need to do that browser. And this is partly also why I like going to Microsoft and having to meet these people who actually say, oh, we want to keep our users in Windows 8, Windows XP and IE8 because we hate them. Or I don't know what kind of decision people do, but it's your choice. It's the web. The web was defined as a distributed environment where it doesn't matter what hardware we use, what ability you are, what gender you are, what religion you are invited to play on the web and be a publisher and a consumer of the web. So saying you need one certain browser to do it because as developers we love that thing is just lazy. Fact is, Microsoft Edge is coming and will be something a lot of people use, because there's a lot of people who upgrade to Windows 10, and it's not insignificant. And the good news is that if you support standards and don't assume one special browser, you're totally ready for it. That's what I think browsers are about. And I don't know if I'm still going to stay at Microsoft. Maybe I go to Google next. My main point was always browsers should compete on the Chrome, not the browser Chrome, but the Chrome of the browser. The functionality of the browser, the Cortana integration like we have right now, or Google Now integration, or whatever Apple does, and whatever Opera does. This is why people should choose a browser, not because of the engine. The engines should be on par. They should do the same things that we promise you developers for years and years and years. And we deserve as developers to have that kind of stuff, but also us browser makers can only do that when you stop sniffing browsers. I mean, it's like all of us right here was like, do you do browser sniffing? No, never. Terrible. I would never do, and we probably all did. At one time or another, we did, and that code is somewhere, and we left the company and forgot about it because we just got drunk directly afterwards because we didn't want to do it, and our boss told us to do it. Or we used a library that does it without us realizing it. Oh, this stuff is out on the web, and it has to go away. And this is what I mean, there's no more excuses. We built a wonderful browser here. Chrome built an amazing browser. Firefox built an amazing browser. Opera, Sailfish, whatever is out there. All of these browsers are beautiful pieces of work. None of them are there because they want to hate developers. All of them think they're doing the right thing. But we're not making it easy for them as developers if we only test for, is it Internet Explorer in that string, and then we give it the 1996 experience. Because this is going to kill any new innovation. And we want people to upgrade their Firefoxes, their Chromes, their Internet Explorers. We now have a chance to do things right for web by working towards interoperability. Don't use things that only work in one browser. Use things that work in all of them. Test things out that are only in one browser, but you're never going to be in a one browser environment unless you send everybody a laptop with the browser on it. This here in the status.modern.ie is where you can see which browsers support what. So you can filter down by saying like, I want to have a thing that is supported by, and I want to say that it's supported by all browsers, and then show me the things. And then start clicking around on that. CanIUse.com does the same thing, but doesn't have the filtering functionality. It's the same data set, actually. We feed it back to CanIUse. And there you can see what is already available. And I promise all of you, you find things that you think are not useful yet or not usable yet, and they are usable because nobody keeps up with all the browsers, what they're doing over time, except for crazy people like PPK and me. If you have something to say to the team, don't go to @IE, that's the marketing team. That's for stickers and stuff. MS Edge Dev is the Twitter client of the developer team, and they answer there quickly. Most of the time it's Jacob Rossi and me, and a few others as well. But there's 24-hour kind of support. But please tell us something useful. Tell us something, this is broken, not like, you suck, you should do the same as Chrome. Because I heard that in Firefox long enough. So that's where you reach them. There's also the dev.modern.ie, and that's the main landing page that's been around like 3 weeks now. It's actually on GitHub as well. We're going to clean that up, and if you want to build a website that looks like this, just use that one. It has like news and community information, tools to use, demos to show you what HTML5 can do that work across all browsers, and not like other companies saying like, this is an experiment for this and that browser. It shows you there's a flight simulator, for example, that we released on Build that was a bit of a nudge to the one that was in Excel. And there's great tools in there. If you have a Mac like me, and not like me, but something similar, because that's mine, you can use remote.ie. That is just a little app that you install, and then you double-click it, you get a Azure build of Windows 10 with Edge in it, and you can test in that thing. So you don't need to download any virtual image and install all kind of like VM software. It's just a double-click on an icon, and it's always the newest one that you will get there as well. If you want to test your local host on that, just use an HTTP tunnel or an HTTPS tunnel, SSL tunnel. I use ngrok, which is pretty good. You just start ngrok on your command line, and then your local host gets an IP, much like DynDNS used to be and these kind of stuff, or DynIP used to be, and then you can test in the virtual machine what you have on your hard drive. You can also download full virtual machines. These have been changed from the 30-day thing to become long living now as well, so you don't have to every 30 days download another 6 gig just to test Internet Explorer. Also, the trick is if you use something like Parallels, just save a snapshot and start the snapshot again, so then the data doesn't go out, but I didn't tell you that. There's a quick site scan, which allows you to enter a website, and it shows you all the problems that this website has, like all the prefixed versions, all the outdated ways of doing it, and it's a very simple way to fix some very, very small paper cuts that are on the web. So I hope that I didn't bore you with this, but I think it's a very important point to see that a company like Microsoft had to write a browser in a kind of like sausage factory way, because the web is already rather broken, rather than just stick with standards. And we built this browser for you. So go to uservoice.modern.ie if you have any problem with IE or any MS Edge or any problem or question about it. Status gives you the status. Remote modern IE gives you the thing to test it on another machine. Insider.windows.com if you're a Windows user and you want to get the next cool stuff that's coming up. I'm CodePoet on Twitter. I thank you very much, and that was me.